Stop for 1 second and close your eyes. Now point north. Go on. Don't guess from the room. Don't think about the street outside. Just let your body do it. You can't, can you? Your hand hovers somewhere. It picks a direction because it has to pick something. And you already know, before you open your eyes, that you're probably wrong. Every single ancestor you have could have done that. Not most of them, all of them. For roughly 300,000 years, a human being who could not answer that question walked away from camp one morning and did not come back. And here's what makes this uncomfortable. The reason you can't do it isn't that you're bad at directions. It's that something in your body has been switched off. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what that something is and why the moment it goes quiet, your own nervous system starts lying to you about where straight ahead is. But first, understand what you're actually missing. There were no roads, no signs, no trails except the ones animals made and then abandoned. Nobody had drawn a map of anywhere, because nobody had drawn a map at all. Your ancestors did not live in a small world. That's the myth. They walked. A single foraging trip could take you 8, 10, 15 kilometers from the fire you slept next to, out past the ridge you recognized, past the last tree you had a name for, and then you had to come back, not roughly back, not eventually. Back to one specific spot in a landscape that looks, in every direction, exactly like every other spot. So how did they do it? And more importantly, why can't you? In 2009, a researcher named Jan Suman, working with Mark Ernst at the Max Planck Institute for Biological Cybernetics in Germany, decided to test something that everybody had said for centuries but nobody had actually measured. The old claim was that lost people walk in circles. Suman took people out into two places, the Sahara Desert in Tunisia and the Bienwald, a dense forest in Germany. He strapped GPS trackers to them and gave them one instruction: walk in a straight line. That's it. Just walk straight. And here's what the GPS recorded. When the sun was out or at night, when the moon was visible, people did fine. They held a line. Not a perfect line, but a line. The second the sun slipped behind a cloud, the tracks bent. Not dramatically, not all at once. The walkers didn't feel a thing. They reported, honestly, that they were walking straight, and the GPS showed them curving, slowly, into loops crossing their own path, sometimes more than once, without ever noticing they'd been there before. But that's not the strange part. Suman ran a second version. Same instruction, walk straight, except this time the participants were blindfolded. No sun, no trees, no horizon, nothing at all. Those people didn't drift into wide, lazy loops. Some of them walked in circles less than 20 meters across. Think about what that means. 20 meters, smaller than a swimming pool. A person walking with full confidence, absolutely certain they are heading somewhere, spiraling around a patch of ground the size of a tennis court. And the explanation is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. It isn't that one leg is longer. Suman and Ernst tested that idea, and it didn't hold up. It isn't muscle imbalance. It isn't a limp. It's that straight ahead is not a fact your body knows. It's a running estimate your brain assembles from your inner ear, from the pressure in your feet, from the tension in your muscles, dozens of tiny signals, each one slightly wrong. Every step, those small errors add a fraction of a degree. Nothing corrects them. So the direction your brain believes is straight ahead slowly rotates away from the direction that actually is. Without something outside your body to check against, you don't walk straight and fail. You walk in a circle and feel successful the entire time. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Kenneth Hill spent decades in Nova Scotia studying what people actually do when they realize they're lost. Real cases, real searches, hundreds of them. And the pattern he documented is not the one you'd expect. The first thing that goes isn't your sense of direction. It's your judgment. There's a moment searchers have a name for it when the landscape stops being familiar. And the response is almost never to sit down and think. It's to move, faster, to walk toward the thing that might be the way back, then abandon it 30 seconds later for a different thing that might be the way back. Lost people burn energy at a spectacular rate, going almost nowhere. They shed equipment. They walk past shelter. They are frequently found within a very short distance of where they were last seen, having covered enormous ground in tight, panicked, invisible loops. Now hold that in your head, a modern adult, well-fed, wearing good boots, dissolving inside an hour, and let's go somewhere. About 11,500 years ago, on the flat white mud of a lake bed in what is now White Sands National Park in New Mexico, someone went for a walk. The tracks are still there. Matthew Bennett and an international team working with the National Park Service mapped them, more than 1.5 kilometers of continuous human footprints, one of the longest prehistoric journeys ever recovered. And you can read the whole story in the mud. The person was moving fast, faster than a normal walking pace, the kind of speed you use when you want to be somewhere and you want to be there soon. They were carrying a toddler, roughly 2 years old. You know this because every so often the tracks show a set of tiny prints beside the adult ones, where the child was set down for a moment, probably to shift them from one hip to the other and then picked up again. Halfway through, the mud records something else. A giant ground sloth crossed the trackway, and the sloth stopped. It reared up onto its hind legs, turned, trampling the human prints as it swung around, catching a scent. Then it dropped back down and left. A mammoth crossed the same path, apparently without breaking stride. And then, sometime later, the human tracks come back. Same route. Almost exactly the same line. Without the child, nobody knows what that means. And the honest answer is that nobody ever will. But look at what it does tell you. Without any guesswork at all. That person, in an open landscape with no roads, no signs, no marks of any kind, walked 1.5 kilometers out and then walked back along a line they could reproduce. You have just watched a modern adult on flat ground, with shoes on, spiral into a 20-meter circle the moment a cloud passed. So what did they have that you don't? And this is the answer. And it is much simpler and much stranger than you'd think. In 2019, an anthropologist named Hanel Zhang went to live with the Mbengele Bayaka, a hunter-gatherer people in the rainforest of the Republic of the Congo. Rainforest is the hardest possible test case. There is no horizon. There are no distant mountains. You cannot see more than a few meters in most directions. Zhang ran over 600 pointing tests with 54 people, aged 6 to 76, at more than 60 locations scattered through the forest. Each time, point to a place you can't see from here. Children as young as 6 pointed as accurately as adults. 6 years old, in a forest with no landmarks, pointing at a river they couldn't see. But the detail that cracked the whole thing open was this. The children were accurate as long as the sun was visible. Take the sun away, and the children's accuracy fell apart in unfamiliar ground. The adults didn't. The adults stayed accurate in any weather. Zhang's work is the first real behavioral evidence that human beings use a sun compass, the same trick honeybees use. The children were still learning to read it. The adults had read it so many times they'd built the whole forest in their heads and no longer needed the sky to check. Which brings you to the thing that was promised at the start. You have the hardware. All of it. In 2014, John O'Keefe and May Britt and Edvard Moser won the Nobel Prize for finding it. Place cells neurons in your hippocampus that fire only when you're in one specific location. And grid cells, which lay a repeating triangular grid over the world around you, like invisible graph paper, so your brain can keep count of how far you've moved and in what direction. You are, right now, carrying a positioning system that took evolution millions of years to build. It's just running with nothing coming in, and it may go deeper than that. In 2019, a team led by Joseph Kirschvink at Caltech sat people in a shielded chamber and quietly rotated a magnetic field around their heads, the same strength as the Earth's. The participants felt nothing and reported nothing, but their brainwaves reacted. Something in there registered the change. You may still have a magnetic sense. You just can't get the reading. So here's the twist, and it isn't flattering. Getting lost is not a skills problem. It's not courage. Your ancestors did not have some rugged instinct that you've gone soft and lost. They had exactly the same brain you're using to watch this. The difference is that they never stopped feeding it. Every day of their lives, the sky was an instrument. The angle of the light was information. Which side of the trunk the moss grew on was information. The direction the wind had been coming from since morning was information. They took a reading roughly every waking minute without ever once calling it navigation. You take one reading a day from a screen, and it's already the answer. In 2020, Louisa Damani and Veronique Bobot at McGill University tested this directly. They looked at people's habitual GPS use and then measured their actual spatial memory. Heavier lifetime GPS use lined up with worse spatial memory and worse self-guided navigation. Then they followed some of the participants for 3 years. The ones who used GPS most were the ones whose spatial memory declined most. The system doesn't break. It just stops being asked. You are not worse than your ancestors at finding your way home. You're better equipped than any human who has ever lived. And you've unplugged the only cable that made it work. So, close your eyes one more time. Point north. Your hand still doesn't know. But every part of the machinery behind it does. The grid cells, the place cells, maybe something quieter than both. All of it waiting for one honest look at the sky. It was never a talent your ancestors had, and you lost. It was a question they asked the world every single day, and you stopped asking.